everybody to Accelerate 90. This is our Monday all call. I'm super excited to have you guys here with us today. I'm Angela Paoli, Vice President of Education and Broker Development here at Properties Christie's International Real Estate, and I'm excited to be your host today. We have two awesome guests today. We have Candace Taylor and Anthony Flora. If you guys want to come on, welcome to our call. We're going to dive right into a great conversation with both of them. Give me 1 second to stop sharing my screen and we will get started. Hey guys, how are you?
Good morning, guys. How is
Good
everyone?
morning.
Good.
Me.
That was Anthony's song choice. I have to say that I loved it. I love the Eagles. I saw we have some big Eagles fans in the chat, so that's exciting. But thanks for
Love
being
it.
here today, guys. We're gonna have a really great conversation. Candace is our managing broker of all of our Indiana offices. So we're excited to have Candace here. Candace also just went through Ninja, right?
Yes,
How
very
was it?
exciting. Oh my gosh, it was so much good information. I'm still digesting a lot of it. Wish that I could rewind the clock and go back to the start of my real estate career
Yeah.
and have taken these 4 days back then because it would have changed my life. So I'm going to push as many people as I can now through for the following years coming up to go through that because it's quite the experience. Big
Yeah,
fan.
isn't it? It's so great. And it really
Yeah.
helps you understand the principles that AT uses when we're coaching and training our agents too. So I love all of it. And how was the food for at Ninja, Candace?
The food was amazing. Angela took great care of us, had these awesome snacks out. We come out and there was like salty and sweet, and it was amazing. Great job
Yeah.
on breakfast, lunch, and the snacks. Thank you.
We always have a really good time at Ninja. It's honestly one of my favorite parts of my job. One of my favorite things to do is our Ninja installation every year. So if you guys have not taken Ninja, maybe consider it next year. It's worth your time. All right, so
Absolutely.
we also have Anthony Flora here from the Flora Blahnik team from our Logan Square office. And welcome to you, Anthony.
Thank you. You killed it. Like pronunciation
Awesome.
impeccable.
I was super concerned about that. I was like, how do I pronounce this?
You weren't gonna mess up my name. You're gonna mess up my business partner's name. So that's
Right,
okay.
right.
He's not here.
Thank you guys for being here today. We had a really great prep call last week, and Candace and I were actually at Ninja while we were Zooming with Anthony, and we were kind of prepping for the call today. And we were both sitting there listening to Anthony talk, and we were like, "Oh my God, this is like the holy grail of agents, right? Like you do
Yes.
so many things right, and I'm just so excited to have you on today." So, Candace, did you want to start kind of throwing some questions Anthony's way?
Yeah, I wanted Anthony, if you could share with us, like you did with Angela and I, just something about your background, how you got started,
Yeah.
what you started doing first, and kind of what you're bringing us up to date with what your business looks like now.
Yeah. It's really interesting you're talking about Ninja. So confession, I have not done Ninja at. However, I started out at Keller Williams. I was just there for 1 year at the beginning of my career, and I did basically their equivalent of it. And it was painful kind of at the time, but it did really set some habits that I see kind of come through the coaching from the I think the 8 or 9 years I've been in the business now, and it did really kickstart my business. So I got started in 2016, 2017. I was at the time doing hotel management with Marriott International here in Chicago. I'm from Indiana and kind of got started later. I don't want to say later in my life. I'm 41 years old, but uh, I didn't grow up in Chicago. I didn't have a network of agents or a network of like community that I had to kind of jumpstart my business. And so I decided after 4 years at Marriott to jump out of that. I was done with corporate, and I'm like, I want to be in real estate. I bought a condo with Joellen Davis. Shout out to her, kind of a long-term ad agent, and I bought a condo with her. Didn't have my license, and that was my first exposure to real estate. I had no idea about buildings. I had no idea about construction. I had no idea about anything. All I knew was hospitality and was like kind of doing the corporate thing. And I bought that condo and I'm like, like I'm getting out of this and I'm going into real estate. I don't know what it's going to look like. So I got my license and jumped in. So my first year was painful, I think is the right word, but very, very good. I was very uncomfortable. I I knew that I wasn't going to do the amount of business that I wanted to do if I didn't do something. And that something ended up being cold calling. So I bought a subscription. It was like $400 a month to this service that every night would mine canceled and expireds from the MLS. It would go through public data and pull phone numbers and emails. In the morning, I would like put my headphones in and I would call. And I was calling all over the city. The very first one I got was in Inglewood. I had one on the 9800 block, kind of down almost by Indiana. And I'm calling these owners who didn't sell. And I would get them on the phone, and I was so nervous and I was so like anxious, I guess. But I knew that, like, hey, like once I'm with people, like once I'm one-on-one with them, it's great. It's that unknown that you don't know. And so I would call every morning for like an hour and a half. And my only goal was just to get an appointment. And so I got better. I had some skills, you know, and it all came down to you have to read people. That's what we do in our business. And so I would mirror and match. And if they were like abrupt and like, why are you calling me? Don't ever call. I would apologize. I would say, hey, just reaching out to sell your place. If you still wanted to sell, love to connect. And sometimes I'd get a meeting and sometimes I wouldn't. It's a numbers game. I mean, I think that gets talked about a lot. If you do the activities, you'll get results. And so I did that for a year and a half, and I sold 5 million my first year, and it got easier every single day. And I probably would have done 3 transactions or 4 transactions without that. And I don't know how many transactions I did, but it was 5 million. And that was the difference between kind of jumpstarting my career and just probably taking 3 to 4 years to like earn a living doing it.
That's amazing that you did that well in the first year. I mean, really,
Crazy.
with something that you didn't like doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a mental game to it too, because I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I don't want to cold call for the rest of my life. And I know the people that still do it and they get good at it, and you kind of do lose the fear of it. You kind of lose, you're like, hey, and I had been yelled at on the phone in hotel world. Like, that's what I came from. So in a way, it was just getting out of my own way, getting, you know, kind of past that fear. And then it was, you know, you're kind of on the phone with them and you're like, what's going through their head? What's their motivation? All these questions that we later in the transaction or later in the relationship become super important. That was just accelerated. I had to determine that in 30 seconds or less. And so it kind of built that skill of like reading people and saying like, hey, what matters to you? Are you an efficient person? Do you want me to cut to the chase and tell you what I would do in 10 seconds or less because you have other things? Or do you want a long, warm, fuzzy conversation and connect on an emotional level? And so I kind of had to determine in, you know, a split second, which is it? Sometimes you would get it wrong and that relationship wouldn't take off, but
Yeah,
you know,
that's a
enough
great
did
training
that.
ground. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's great
Yeah.
training for you.
Yeah. And so, you know, that was the first year, and it was kind of trial by fire, and I started doing it, and you know, you're also learning what the transaction is like and how to go through that. But by the end of the first year, I was at a point to where I was like, okay, I like doing this. I committed to a year doing it. I said, I don't care how the first 3 months go or the first 6 months go. I'm in this for a year. If I hate it, I'll go look for another job. And by, you know, 6, 8, 9 months, I was like, this is it. Like, I'm not doing anything else with my life. My business will evolve and grow and change, but like, this is what I'm doing. And so, yeah, that was the first year. And it was a decision to kind of keep
Yeah.
going, and I certainly don't regret it.
So
And
what does
and
your business look like now? You know, now that you're, you know, coming from that, you've gone through
Yeah,
that, transitioned, and what does it look like now?
yeah. So this is I was like doing some math. I'm not good with dates, so doing some math before this call. I think I'm coming up on 8 or 9 years of in the business. And so after that first year, I met my current business partner, Luke Blahnik, and just a mutual lender introduced us. We were kind of doing interesting things and just personalities. We hit it off. And so after kind of a few months of talking, we just decided to merge our books of business. And so we did that. That was kind of both of us jumping in and saying, hey, what we're doing right now, we're gonna be more than the sum of our parts. Like, the goal is not to do exactly what we're doing right now together. It's to like do what we're doing and grow this whole thing into, you know, into a much larger business. So we did that. And Luke's background was kind of flipping homes and construction. And I had kind of worked in some construction, but didn't know a lot. And kind of naturally we ended up doing a lot in the multi-unit sphere. And so we, our business is probably a third, a third, a third, a third multi-units, a third condos, a third single families, and it's the whole gamut. And I think I kind of took the plunge, bought a building at that point, rehabbed it, lived in it, and then went on to do that again a few times. And so that's how I learned kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do, from a building material standpoint, from a construction, from a cost standpoint, because I think those are kind of the nuanced pieces of value that we can add later. It's one thing, kind of my first year I'm in there, I'm like doing comps on the MLS. I'm like, it's math, like it's spreadsheets. You can figure out what it is. But really on the buy side, I think this is where it's been a difference maker, and that continued growth over the years has led to us doing more and more business. I think we'll be at about 40 or 45 million this year. And that's just based off of warm referrals and kind of doing right by people and really giving them a lot of value during the purchase transaction. I remember kind of a few years in when I was starting to sell, to list what I had helped people buy. And I was like, man, I'm like really glad I helped people buy the right thing. And some of that was, okay, I understand kind of what kind of construction went into this building. We've looked at what the reserves are going to be. We know what the lifespan of different components are, roofs and HVACs, and we can plan accordingly for these clients. And they're all in different levels. If you're in a high rise, it's a different thing than if you're in a 3 flat, but it's all the same gist. It's getting your clients in something that's going to impact their life in a really positive way. I'm getting long-winded on all of this, I recognize, but
No, good.
yeah, I think that building construction understanding, and it was a slow process. It wasn't instant, but kind of doing it myself made a huge difference. I remember on inspections, I would ask so many questions. I would follow the inspectors around. I wanted to understand. And also when they would flag something, I would push into it rather than kind of like, oh, like, let's see if the client notices that the inspector is kind of like harping on this and then they still want to buy it. Like, I'd be like, no, like, tell us more. Like, why does this matter? What's important about the fact that you're flagging this? Almost, and sometimes the clients would, have glossed over that. And it's like, no, let's pay attention to that. And either we'll figure it out and it'll be okay, or it won't, and we'll move on to something else. So kind of really the first couple of years, probably the inspectors were like, leave me alone. Like this guy talks too much. He asks too many questions, but it was like, I wanted to understand everything. And
I'm sure your clients appreciated that a lot, the buyers.
Yeah. And I think that sped up my knowledge of what I was doing as well. And kind of not being afraid to kill a transaction too. Or, it's ultimately the client that does it, but to support them in that, or to say, hey, you do what you do, but like, this is where I'm at. And mentally, I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is scary, or this is a problem, or it's not. And like, we can figure it out. But we'll probably talk more about that later because I think it's super important. But yeah, so anyways, Luke and I merged our book of business. We came to I think in 2017-ish. I've been here and it's been great. And every year is different. I didn't keep cold calling. It was choice. I was like, hey, and the market's changed, but it turned into, I was able to start getting clients through open houses, through warm referrals, kind of that second and third year. And have just kind of worked on creating kind of these clients for life, I think, that we often talk about.
Two things that like stand out to me about your past is you had no like local network of people, right? You really didn't have like a book of business.
Yep.
And that's hard. That's tough. And then second, you did like old school cold calling for a year. Like not many people do that, so I just think it's a testament to how the hard work that you put in and building a sphere for yourself, and I just think that's awesome. So those are two things that stood out to me. But I think another really big differentiator with you and the way that you manage your clients is the fact that you really do a lot of things outside of the transaction to create value and stay connected. There's two big themes we've had in coaching and training this year and the past year, couple years really, is one is providing that unreasonable hospitality, and two is showing that value outside of the transaction. So can you talk a little bit about how you provide that value outside of the transaction when it comes to, maybe landlords or your network
Yeah.
of people? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we really try and set a tone during the transaction that we are here, available, like the phone can ring or text anytime, like beyond the transaction. And so particularly when we're helping clients get into like multi-units, for instance, and I don't recognize this as one silo, but getting into a multi-unit, you have a couple different types. You have the investors who are just like, I want to understand that I'm buying a good building. We need to break it down financially. I've done this before. I'll do it again. Let's do that. And then you have this other vein with the multi-units where it's perhaps first or second home time buyers. And they're like, hey, I want to get into an income producing asset that kind of can build long-term wealth. It can supplement the mortgage payment for various reasons, but maybe they're going to live in it and rent out a couple units. And they don't do this professionally. This is going to be their home, and it's going to be an investment for them. And so we do a lot of coaching and offering of value for what that can look like for them. And so one, it's introducing them to the concept and saying like, hey, if you purchase a multi-unit, here's what it's like to be a landlord. I'm a landlord. My business partner is a landlord. We've done it. Here's what it's like to go through rehab processes, whether it's cosmetic, I have some clients right now. We've got a great deal on a condo. It's just a condo, not a multi-unit. So a little bit anecdotal, but it's like the place is perfect and the kitchen sucks. And it's like, hey, here's your three options, or here's how we can talk through, and we're getting contractors through this week. We're under contract. We're closing soon. They're going to swap out a new kitchen, something they wouldn't have maybe been comfortable doing on their own. It's actually not that intimidating. Simultaneously, you want to go into it with eyes wide open and realistic expectations. So we help set that. And then, for instance, with landlording, the rental aspect is really interesting. Helping clients understand, okay, here's maybe what rents might be. That'll happen during the transaction, during the due diligence. And then they move in, they purchase, they move in, and they're like, hey, I have to rent out this other unit. Can you do it for me? Or what do we do? And the answer is always yes. Like, of course, if you want us to do it, we'll do it for you. However, like there's another alternative. And if I will happily coach them through kind of, here's the paperwork, here's the questions you need to ask, here's how to do it yourself, here's how to vet, here's the pitfalls to avoid. And all of that happens kind of down the road. And if they're like hands off and, hey, please, I just want to taken care of, absolutely. But if you want to holistically kind of get into that world, you need to dive into that. And so kind of offering that, and that's just part of the value proposition, so to speak, beyond the end of it. I'll get clients all the time that'll be like, hey, do you have an electrician? And the answer is like, yes, but let me ask a few questions about, what's the issue here? Are we dealing with low voltage? Are we dealing with, some comprehensive, is it an electrical service upgrade? What is it? And then it's almost educational post that. And it's like, hey, here's a couple guys to call. Here's a couple companies to call. It's kind of, hey, I want to understand. I don't just want to throw you this person and like drop you in. Or it's like, hey, I need a plumber. And it's like, is this a big plumbing fix? And kind of making sure that they're also not getting taken advantage of, or there's different price points. Sometimes a certain job can vary by several thousands of dollars. It's like, do you need a new roof, or do you just, is it the parapet? How do we figure out what's going on so you don't spend a week spinning your wheels and freaking out and knowing how to kind of navigate these building maintenance things that you have post. So setting, I think the one thing that we try and do during the transaction is just make sure our clients understand that line of communication is always open. And that like our body language says that our verbal language says that like, hey, I'm here when you need me. This is a long-term relationship. We want to be alongside you for the ride for the entire way.
Yeah. I mean, the
That's so good.
education, like the education that you provide to people that know you alone is so stellar. And I just think that it really, really sets you apart. The fact that you're willing to like coach new landlords on how to be a landlord, that just
Yeah.
follows them through their whole life, and that's not necessarily you just wanting a transaction. That's you
Right.
truly just providing value and being helpful. So I love that.
Yeah. And I
You know,
wouldn't,
one
I
thing
wouldn't have, oh yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say that it's so easy for us as realtors when we're busy and we've got all these, you know, deals happening, to just give out a number and just say, "Yep, here you go. Here's a plumber," you know. But the thing that I think that the elevated type of service you're giving is your time. You're basically stopping everything and saying, you know, okay, what's happening? What's the problem? Let's talk about it. Let's, you know, I mean, that's a huge benefit. You're basically treating them instead of like just, you know, a past client or a customer like a friend or like you would treat
Yeah.
your family. And I think that's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Love it. Candace, want to talk a little bit about unreasonable hospitality?
Yes. So there were a couple things that you mentioned when we were prepping. And you said that there were a couple of renters. There was one multi-unit you were selling, and there were some renters living inside. And they were going to be, I think they were going to be on their way out, right? They had to get out. And so they weren't happy about it. But you came in, you treated them very well, and then you can pick up from there and tell the story. And then there was one other rental thing as well that you told us about.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think these are both kind of examples of like being just trying to be like a good human in the circumstance that you're in. So I have a client, kind of long-term client, sold a few things for him, and he had this single family home. I think kind of an old farmhouse, had 4 different renters in it, and he's like, I'm done with this. Like, I want to sell it. So I'm like, okay, great. So we put it on the market. It was like 400,000 or 500,000, and went and met with the tenants, and they were like, like, this sucks. This is so annoying. Like, we're gonna have to find somewhere to live. We're gonna have to put up with showings. We're gonna have to da 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 da. And I'm like, unfortunately, yes, to both of those. It's going to happen. I have a fiduciary duty to that seller. However, like, I also have a duty to you as like a human being to like make this, if you can communicate with me, like, I will try and make this as positive and as easy. It's not going to be easy, but as easy for you as possible. And so I'm like, tell me the times when showings don't work, or when, what are your guys' schedules? What are you comfortable with? Reiterated that, I'll be there during showings. I met them in person so they could see, rather than just like a text. It's like, hey, let me come over. I'll walk the place. I'll meet you guys. You're going to, I'll be here for these. And then we just kind of worked through it. And it was a long process. And we sold it, generally just positive. It wasn't an easy process for them. They all found different places, and life moved on. And, because it was going to be an owner occupant place. So, fast forwards, maybe like a year or so, I get a text from that one of the tenants saying, hey, like, again, appreciate it. I have some friends that are moving from Kansas City. Can you help them find a place? And I'm like, of course. Like, met them. Those friends turned out to be like $1.1 million single family buyers. So help them buy that. I was like, this is wonderful. Met those friends' parents. Those parents have kind of turned into my best client. Like, 3 times the amount of volume that any other client of mine has been worth. And it's just kind of like, by treating that tenant like a client in a way, or a future client, or just like a human being, it turned into like by far my number one client, just through a text.
I love
Like a
that
year after the
story.
transaction.
I love it so
Yeah.
I
much.
love that story so much. There was one other thing that you did. You went and you showed a garden unit in the city, and no one else
Yeah,
wanted to
this
take the
was
lead.
Yeah, so this was like my first year at App Properties. We were based out of the Chicago office, I think like a kind of a satellite office at the time, which isn't there anymore. And just a call came in, and it was a guy. He's like, "Hey, I got a building, Ukrainian Village, a garden unit. It's not renting. Like, why isn't it renting? I want it rented." And everyone in the office was like, garden unit, like, no thanks. And I was like, I did look up the address, and I looked up the address. I'm like, that's like a nice gray stone building. That's me being transparent. It wasn't out of like the goodness of my heart that I'm like, I want to, no. But I joke. It pays to say yes. And so I just said, yeah, like, I'll go meet with him. If his expectations are unrealistic, I gave him some of my time, just like many people have given me their time as I've learned in this industry and grown. And that's what we do. We give our time to people, and, we make the decision, am I going to give my time here or not? And as a business owner, we make that call every day with the clients we work with. But I said yes. So I went, I walked it. It was a garden unit. It was $900 or $1,000. I said, yes, like, I'll help you rent it. Here's what we're going to do. She's like, why didn't it rent? I'm like, well, let's, you talk to the thing, let's do pictures, let's present it. You need to paint. We did that kind of stuff. It rented. He's like, this is great. Fast forward, whatever amount of time that was, it wasn't that long, like maybe a year. We stayed in contact and I sold the Greystone and the lot next to it. I think that might have been my first $1 million transaction. It was north of $1 million. And it was just from kind of saying yes and putting yourself in an opportunity to have something happen kind of beyond, you can do the mental math and you're like, okay, I'm going to go rent a garden unit for $900. And like, if I'm lucky, I'll make 900, but it's probably half and whatever. Or it's like, I have an opportunity to create a relationship with someone who's looking for a relationship in this world that I do business in. And so, and still a relationship and help them buy their next home and kind of, again, creating it's like, the flywheel, or it's like the freight train. It's like, once you get it moving, you just need to kind of keep it maintain it. And like, business happens if you're treating people like you'd want to be treated.
I love that. And I remember you saying something like, treat everyone like gold, regardless of price point, and also regardless of, how long the process takes. You talked to us a little bit about how you sometimes work with clients for a very extended period of time because you really want to put them in something that makes sense for them.
Yeah. Sometimes it's someone knows exactly what they want and you're going to show them 3 or 5 places. I've had people buy the first thing they see. That's kind of an anomaly, but it happens. And sometimes you have the clients who are like, we don't exactly know what this is going to look like, but we know we want to buy and we're going to start at this price point. We're going to see if we can get this. I have some clients right now that started looking at multi-units and texted me over the weekend and were like, hey, can we talk on Monday? We might go the condo route. So we're going to talk today. And that's after months of kind of going in that direction. And that's okay because it's about people and you're providing a service. And so how I help with that. And sometimes I'll have people that kind of look for a year softly. I mean, we're not going out every single weekend for a year, but we'll be looking for a year and they'll say, hey, we need to hit pause. We're not finding it, or it's just not feeling right. We're going to hit pause. And, we'll try and talk about it as soon as it needs to be talked about. If they're not where they need to be, I'll call it and I'll say, hey, like, are you ready for this? Are you prepared? Are you committed? We'll talk about all of those things, but sometimes it's the process that provides that clarity for people. And they need to know that you have their back. If they're going to cancel, they need to know that you have your back. And we'll have honest conversations where it's like, hey, you should do this. It's okay if you don't, but I will support you in what the decision you make, and we'll keep going and we'll look and we'll figure it out. Because you don't want to just yes people, but also sometimes you have that moment of saying, yeah, no, I'm here. Let's hit pause. We're going to pick it up in 3 months and we're going to look again. And I tell people, I don't care if you look at 50 places or 5 places, it all comes out in the wash for me. Like, as a business owner, you get the easy ones and you're going to get the hard ones. And if you just average them out, it's all business and it works out. And people, I think, feel that. Like, I never want to be in the position where I need a transaction to close in order to like fund my life and my business. And so it's like, it needs to truly be kind of that fiduciary. People pick up on it. And I think, you talk about unreasonable hospitality, and I'm not a great gift giver. Like, I'm not great at like remembering that like they have a dog named Sally and like their dog eats, this kind of treat, or I'm going to do, I mean, I can do a little bit of that. But I think where I try and approach it is like, my time, like the best time I have with a client is during the transaction. You don't ever get that opportunity to make a difference in their life later. You can send texts, you can send notes. Those are all very important and can really move the needle. But the number one moment I have is like now with the client when I'm with them in the process. And that sets the tone for everything else. It sets the tone for the years that go in between their next transaction. And so it kind of, I like how people think. I like figuring out people. So it's like, I do have clients who are like, we're not holding hands. It's business transaction at its core. And I read that and I'm like, hey, yep, here's my thoughts. Here's the analysis. We'll talk when we need to. That's it. Transaction. See you in 2 to 5 years. Great. And then you have the other clients who are like, no, let's get to the core of why this is hard for you, or what, you're waffling between a multi-unit and a condo or single family, or like, you might be buying this, but are you going to be in this stage of life for more than 2 to 3 years? If not, hit pause. Like, so you have those clients. It's maybe a little more like a therapist. And we're just trying to get to the core of what we do. I'm not going to solve the rest of their life's problems, but I can kind of speak to what we're doing, you know, with real estate, with their home. And it's a big impact on people. And I actually appreciate that and enjoy that. And so kind of leaning into those, whether it's 1 month for their search and purchase, or if it's 6 or 12 months, kind of leaning into that and saying, hey, we're in this for this time. I'm going to kind of be present with you, and I'm going to just try and connect with you and connect, you know, be myself in this transaction with you.
So great. I mean, everything you're saying is just about creating that client for life. So you gave so many great examples on how you run your business. Thank you so much for sharing all of that awesome information. It's already 9:30, guys. I was like listening to you talk. I'm like,
My
holy
bad.
crap, it's 9:30. But I would love to wrap. If you guys could give us a little bit of inspiration for the week. Candace, we'll start with you.
So the theme that I'm sensing with talking with Anthony is that the gift of time. So I love that because time is free. I mean, you know what I mean? It's free to make a phone call, to reach out to people, to keep maintaining those relationships. And the coming up on the holidays, I would like people to remind people, you know, everyone's kind of focused on holidays and gifts and cards, but focus also on Thanksgiving. I think it's a great time to be different and to reach out to your clients and just offer to have a conversation, offer to meet them for a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, because your time, they really do appreciate that much more than we think, I think. You know, I'm really learning that, and they really love to hear from us. And to, you know, sometimes they can't make getting together, but the thought that you thought of them and asked, that's what counts. And they really do appreciate that.
Love it. Love it. Especially Thanksgiving, November, being grateful. It's perfect. All right, Anthony, what do you want to wrap with?
I love kind of dabbling and thinking about Stoic philosophy, and there's kind of a saying that says you only ever get today. So the future never arrives. It's always only ever today. And so, like, hey, you have a clean slate today. You have an opportunity to just, you know, the meetings that you have set up today, like, be present, connect with people, give of yourself, and kind of give of your time, as Candace kind of called out. And so I think, yeah, it's you get today, and so make the most of it.
Love it. All right. On that note, thank you both for being here today. And I hope everybody makes today a great day. I'll see you guys soon.